And we are live. Got John Reed here. I am in the Massachusetts furnace. Kind of weird. I'm not used to that. Brian Summer, how we doing?
Doing just fine, John.
Brian's infamous slide deck is just about ready to roll here. We got the Enterprise Month in review, and man, for kind of the lazy days of summer, it is definitely a fast-paced environment out there with some late-breaking whiffs that are just like really pretty astounding. Uh, and we already have plenty in the deck. Plus, we got a surprise guest to come class to show up in a little bit. So I think y'all are going to enjoy that. Brian, should we take a look at the infamous slide deck and see what we got going for peeps today?
Pull it on up.
All
Load
right,
that
here
bad
we
boy.
go. And by the way, please start commenting in the stream to let us know you're out there, or if you're having any technical difficulties, so I can make sure you're catching the stream properly. And here we are with the Enterprise Month in review, and let's go to the agenda.
Agenda doesn't change too much, and like you mentioned, for the halftime, we are going to get some commentary from our special cameo guest. But we're going to be talking. I just called it the AI and real fact check kind of section. Uh, John and I are kind of we have this shared gene where we're allergic to hyperbole, and I think we're going to really deflate a few balloons around the AI space. So it'll be interesting to see how that works.
Yeah, I might have to go on medication for that. It's going to be a little tough.
We don't have any EpiPens over here for you, but we might be able to scavenge up a little Benadryl as a stopgap. But anyway, you guys can, if you've ever caught us, you kind of know the drill. We're going to go through the cringy buzzword. We'll talk, each of us go through three of our most underrated enterprise stories that we think really need more airtime. Mentioned the hello Thomas. We mentioned the halftime show, and then we'll cover some of the whiffs and the like going on. So
Enterprise whiffs on a summer day. Excellent.
Yeah. And Bonnie, I wore a tie today just because you're usually someone who's way more better dressed than anyone at any event I go to. So glad to see you're on the discussion thread. Okay, John, let's go right to the buzzword.
By the way, I'm starting to get a slight echo. I don't think it's a huge problem, but audience, please tell me if it's a problem for you, because I can kind of cope with it at the moment. All right. So we have overhyped buzzword of the month. Oh my gosh, look at these.
Yeah, these are all
workforce liquidity really jumps out. I mean, the workforce is definitely liquid right now. It's the only problem is it's falling out of the container.
Yeah, there were only I think according to the Newsday, only 73,000, 73,000 or something in net new jobs added. It was a pretty abysmal number. But these were actually, what's interesting is the source of all these great new, buzzwords is they came from one post from Matt Charney, who is a really fascinating HR industry analyst. And he did a piece, and we might ask our cameo guest today to comment a little on this. But that article was a great tongue-in-cheek poke at HR analysts. So anyway.
Yeah, if you do a search for the state of HR industry analysts and type in Matt's name, you will find it. And oh boy, Brian, we have some competition in the satire and snark category from Matt there.
Yeah, he did a good job. And when I read his piece, I kept thinking, oh God,
it looks like workforce liquidity is definitely touching a chord here. In the chat, and indeed, Bonnie, it is spilling out everywhere.
Yeah, I left the link actually kind of exposed on the screen here so you could see it. It's worth a read. It really is. Matt did a great job talking about the kind of people who haven't held an HR position in the last 20 years of their career. Well, that's the perfect person to be an HR analyst, and he talks about the very somber, deep talks that these kind of folks give at HR conferences. And I've made fun of this many times over the years, because I feel when I speak at these events, I'm the only one there that's going to talk on something in a very serious way, whereas other HR speakers come out on stage and say those soothing words like, but what color is your mood ring? Or engagement. It's not just for weddings anymore. That kind of stuff that just really motivates you. They really dug deep down to come up with some solid content on that. Anyway, thanks. A hat tip to Matt for that great column. And again, highly recommend that reading for everyone on the call.
Indeed. So shall we proceed to our top stories?
Yes, let's go.
All right. So I think I've been driving Brian a little nuts because my top stories are generally less about articles and more about themes. So I set him like a bunch of links. It doesn't really work well for the slides, but the pattern, what we're seeing is a pattern here where like people like me, I can go on about some of the flaws in AI agents, but it's different when like very serious hands-on practitioners, especially those like with a stake in the propaganda around this AI technology, start chiming in with similar concepts. And there's kind of a bad news, good news aspect to all of this. So let me hit on the bad part first and kind of the satirical part as well. Just kind of poking holes in the state of AI agents from a variety of perspectives, despite what we're hearing from vendors. I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory, but it's the compound error problem that folks are gradually waking up to. If each step in an agent workflow has 95% reliability, which is, I would say, wildly optimistic for current LLMs. In fact, you're only going to get to 95% if you have a very well-constructed architecture. 5 steps yield 77% success, and then you go down from there. So anyway, this is a software engineer that wrote this, and there was also a really very influential talk that came out that I featured in Hits and Misses this last week. It's a YouTube video by Mr. Karpathy. I don't want to butcher his first name, but Andre, I think. But anyway, check out Software is Changing Again, because he kind of articulates this vision of the future of software, including this software 3.0 phase, which is primarily like verbal programming. So you're thinking, oh, this guy's like full of hype, but actually he walks through a whole bunch of sort of challenges facing the current LLM environment, challenges which we get to know pretty well right now. Things like jagged intelligence, lack of working memory, and he calls for something I think really important, which is this notion of sort of an autonomy slider. So instead of like idealizing autonomous enterprises like most of the vendors that we run into do, he's talking about really giving people granular control over how much autonomy they want. I really recommend the talk. It'll take you about 40 minutes, but it's well worth kind of going through all of that. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at the moment, I think, with the enterprise, where the irony is that enterprise projects are actually a great opportunity to make the most out of this technology by applying proper constraints. But we can only do that if we don't get carried away. And if we get carried away, then we wind up in the situation of viral news stories like Jason Lemkin got into. Brian, did you hear about Jason? Did you follow this story at all?
Oh yeah, and I snuck that into the very back of our deck. So
okay, yeah. So
we're definitely going to cover it.
So we'll get into that more a little bit later. But anyway, it's an interesting story of an enthusiastic vibe coding experience that culminated in the destruction of a production database. But anyhow, it's in an enterprise context. The good news is you can avoid things like that, but you have to be a little more careful about how you plan these projects. And so that's sort of like my big takeaway is not to shy away from experimentation with new technologies, but a little bit of a sanity check here is sort of what's coming out. And Thomas says current studies find multi-churn agents have a success rate of 30% if a good LLM is used. Yeah, there's a ton of data points around all of this, and the thing is that it doesn't mean that you can't execute on certain kind of workflows. It's just simpler workflows are working a lot better right now. And that's one reason why I've been writing about MCP a lot, because MCP is a technology that helps agents call on third-party tools to get more reliable information as opposed to the fantasy of throwing a bunch of agents in the room and having them talk to each other and actually understand each other, which is kind of like it's more Walt Disney than real world at this point. Yeah, Bonnie says that's like 95% customer satisfaction rate. Yeah, I mean it's not quite there yet, and let's just face the music and then let's do something about it. One of the big things you do about it is the next thing, which is the state of data. So those are the rest of my picks, and it really comes down to there's a whole bunch of articles coming out from different perspectives right now around data, and today's AI is highly dependent on proper data in the context that it's operating in order to fulfill its promise and to be effective. And so everyone's writing about this from different perspectives. And Laura Cesare, she's always on top of this from a supply chain perspective. And she's talking about this fallacy of old data, stale data. And this is really, really tough for modern AI systems to cope with. Like if they get bad old data, they're just not going to function properly. But what's interesting is that no one has totally figured out like what there isn't like one proper AI like architecture yet, but there's this general understanding that you need to think about that, and you need to think about if you're going to expose your users to these systems, they need to be able to call on the right information. And what does that look like? And it turns out it's probably not going to be enough just to throw some APIs on there. You're probably going to have to really think about what that data architecture is going to look like, which vendors are going to help you with it, and all of that. So there's a whole bunch of worthwhile articles that are being written on this topic from a variety of perspectives, including.
Well, wait. Let's stay on that one for just a second.
Yeah.
So my takeaway on that actually a little bit, whatever, more finessed than yours, in that the author of this particular piece is really making a very good case that why are you building like supply chain forecast, and it could be anything. It could be a sales forecast. It could be a number of things. When the data that you're using may have been relevant last year or last quarter, whatever, but the key message is things are changing so fast. Just look at like the tariff situation, the chaos that's going on around that. So if you're going to, it begs the question like, hey, wait a minute, did you train your AI tools on last year's data or what have you? How in the world will the algorithms and the forecast, everything else, have any measure of accuracy or reliability when the data is so out of it? And then that begs the question, should you be using transactional data from your own firm, or should you be actually acquiring different kinds of data sets from the outside to either supplement or replace some of the stuff that you were thinking about using from an AI perspective? All these are great questions to ask, and I think it really makes people sit back and reconsider what their approach on the data side is going to be, and the definition of what is stale. I think no one brought that up, but I as a to do, but I think that's something any great AI development team needs to ask itself is how do we define, or how do we know when data has gotten stale? I think there's a best used by stamp that should go on every data set, every LLM, every, whatever. And people ought to know what that is at the beginning, not discover it, 6 months, a year, whatever, when it's too late.
Right. And one of the really interesting things about that is that, and this is a new stack story that gets also at this same types of topics, not supply chain specific, obviously, but a lot of it is about serving up sort of these quote unquote streams of data for these AI systems to consume. Talking to an expert AI vendor this week, one thing we talked about was, look, you can't make all your data in your enterprise real time, right? And in many cases, it doesn't need to be real time. We're kind of back to the right time conversation. Like if a system hasn't had an updated invoice in 2 weeks, that doesn't need to be a real time stream. It just needs to be the proper data for the system, and the system needs to understand which data it's pulling. These aren't like small challenges, and yet they're very, very important if we want to get to the kinds of usability levels that are going to work for people. Because the fact is that once you get into the 95% range, which takes a lot of work, that can be good enough for a lot of use cases because you don't need to hand that stuff off to agent after agent. You can hand it off to a human at that point, and it can help them do their job better or execute a decision. So this is not all a lost cause. It's just more the overreach that I talk about a lot, the autonomous overreach, the multi-agent overreach. And like Thomas, for example, you talk about how RAC will help in improving multi-step accuracy. I think it will help a little bit, but agents are struggling a lot to share the context with each other. And right now, I would encourage customers to worry less about multi-step accuracy. Let the massive teams at Google and Anthropic sweat that out. Right now, you should worry about getting one workflow right and getting one process right. And along those lines, the best luck Anthropic has had at the moment is creating small dedicated sub agents for specific tasks. And that's one way you can potentially improve that a little bit is dividing things into very simple steps. But in general, I think you have to go back to what problem are you really trying to solve here, and as opposed to, oh, we're using agents and blah, blah, blah. Okay, Bonnie, agree. And having every interaction provide the source data link is key. And yeah, and if you properly use these contextual systems, which are now we have the cool phrase context engineering to describe how we feed that material in. But in general, it should be sourced so that the user can click on the links and do that. And the good news is that enterprise systems are doing that, which is why, once again, the enterprise can lead the way. If we can just be modest and not try to revolutionize everything, we can actually do some good work here. So
So,
context is the word of the day from Thomas as well. So here we go.
so the last paragraph on the quote extract on your slide, I thought when I read that article, that triggered a whole bunch of thoughts with me, and that is, I think a lot of us have been thinking about big bulk data loads to be used to train up LLMs and the like. And what that piece really was telling me is the next problem coming around the corner is going to be, how do we create an AI architecture that can take live data? Think about all the information that could be just pouring out of manufacturing operations, whether it's through IoT devices, whatever. And why can't you pull that into AI? Well, I know why we can't right now, but this whole idea of, extract, transform, and load, that's an old business intelligence concept. And I think it's time to move to, what does AI look like in a real time world? It's going to be a great discussion item for the years to come. Let's go to the
Right,
next
and
story.
then serving it up to everyone who needs it, right? So the support agent might need it, the customer might need it in a self-service capacity. The so-called bot, if we can ever create like actual useful bots, are going to need it. Like, so that's a really interesting discussion. It's one of the focal points of my current research. So if anyone hears about things that are happening there, please let me know, because I think this is really the next step is for customers and vendors to solve kind of like at least to the point where we can actually do useful things. And that's all about data and data architecture right now, because these systems are not going to be smart enough anytime soon to live without that custom data. Now, Brian, we haven't left you with a whole lot of time for your stories, but we're going to do our best here. Let's go to your top stories.
I thought this one was just so shameful that this happened. And it's a story that frankly just pisses me off. I don't know who had all this information. It's all personally identifiable data. It had faces, identity, driver's license, images, passport images, and the like, whatever it is, billions of records of this stuff. And then it got leaked. And it begs the question, not only why wasn't this secured, but who in the right mind would pull all this together and park it in such a vulnerable way? There's nothing here for the listeners other than to get morally outraged. I certainly was when I read this story, and it just points out like anything that could have been scraped, including the most personal of information, probably already has and has probably found its way into an AI tool. Anyway, that's the key point there. Let's go to the
Yeah,
next.
and there's also that major T story that I'll comment on later, but one of the biggest personal violation hacks in history, and it's all got to do with AI and sloppy coding, and we're going to see a lot more of that. All right, Brian, what you got next?
So on the other end of the spectrum, California's got this AI Transparency Act, and it's going to put some regulatory kind of boundaries on some stuff. But more importantly, for images in particular, everything's got to have basically a citation behind it. You know, who created it, where it's coming from, and the intent is to make it harder for people to use maybe some citizen AI tools and foist stuff out on the market that clearly isn't truthful, whatever, or correct, or is salacious, whatever. So I think it's I personally would love to see more of this kind of stuff out there to protect people and their personal information. I want to go to the next one.
Yeah, just a real quick on that, Brian. I think just just as folks are watching this, like right now, it's a little bit of a open season because states currently, as per the most recent skirmishes in Congress, states have the ability to enact their own AI specific regulations at this point. The big
Mhm.
AI vendors aren't happy with that and are going to keep pushing to try to get back the federal initiative to stop states from imposing any regulations. So we'll have to track that story. Some of the things California is trying to do here in terms of proof of origin are going to challenge fundamentally how LLMs work. So that's going to be very interesting to see how much traction they can get on that.
Mhm. This last one I think of mine has to do with, in a fun light, performative corporate culture. And the article talks
Oh
about
no.
how,
What is performative corporate culture?
well, it was going to be the buzzword of the month, but
Oh
no,
wow, there's a lot of competition for that, huh?
yeah, there was a lot of those. Um, but it was talking about this weird phenomenon in companies where, companies are supposed to have a culture and so forth, but how would you feel if you're a brand new hire? You came into work and all the employees came down to the lobby and did a Bollywood dance sequence to welcome you into the company. And as weird as that may sound, certainly to some of us from this part of the world, it begs all these questions like, but what if you're a more shy, retiring person who doesn't want to do that kind of performative activity? And particularly in front of your peers, all I kept thinking about when I was reading this article was the Elaine dance moves in a Seinfeld, and she was out dancing in front of all the coworkers with this. I don't know any way to describe it, but a very spastic kind of deal that came back to eventually embarrass her pretty big time. Anyway, I thought that this is one. I hope this is one trend in the office that maybe just stays in the subcontinent and doesn't make it, stateside. But clearly, if it does, can be some interesting calls going to human resources about it. Anyway,
I worry a little bit about this thing around, are you an influencer? Are you unemployed? Like that there's going to be one personality type that succeeds in the future, which is look at me, I'm cool at marketing me, and everyone else is like, who am I in this world? Hopefully we don't emerge into that dystopia, but unfortunately this article kind of implies we're sort of heading in that direction. Well, Brian, in a sec, we're going to get into our halftime show experience. So our special surprise guest is welcome to log in backstage. What is your assessment of our topic so far? What do we have to do from here?
you're talking to me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
mean to say. Okay.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we've got a few AI kind of related items that we want to discuss. And we want to get our guest cameo person here to throw in her 2 cents on what she does or doesn't like about those.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get on to that then. Uh,
Now, that's not our guest cameo right here.
nope. This is.
That's her. That's Bonnie. We've
Yeah, Bonnie. We could send out a searchlight for Bonnie. Bonnie, come on. Bonnie's not backstage yet. Bonnie, your LinkedIn message has the link in case you didn't see it. Bonnie's on the way. So yeah, so shall we talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, let's talk it. Yeah, let's get into this one.
Because Brian, this is interesting because the future of recruiting and in general, like how HR hiring should work, has been one of your biggest areas that you've written about and talked about. You speak on this on Diginomica as well, and you've kind of been tracing this back for years because you've been looking at this from the vantage point of algorithmic screening systems that are probably deeply unfair, and you've been writing about this whole thing around applicants accelerating the recruiting process with AI, sending out 5,000 applications. What are you going to do about that? Scaring the crap out of HR directors. So, what is your sort of general perception of where all this is headed?
We're moving to an incredible level of dysfunctionality when it comes to recruiting, and I think this Perplexity CEO thinking that it's all going to vanish and AI is going to magically find and hire people for companies with like little or no human intervention. I'd say that is one giant pipe dream. And as soon as Bonnie gets on here, I'll be happy to share what I just discovered. There she is. I think some of the folks know that I periodically apply for jobs with my own resume and everything, just to see how the recruiting process is or isn't working. It's sort of what is the state of dysfunctionality in HR today? And I did that last week. I asked an HR tool um, to make my resume more ATS friendly. And then in particular, I asked it to compare my resume to a business transformation job that was being posted here locally in the Indianapolis area by one of the major employers here. And I just wanted to see what it was going to come back with. And what it produced was some of the most hyperbolic stuff I've ever seen. And it made me think, if everyone else is using this kind of stuff, there's no way any ATS or any recruiter can sift through this bombastic output and make any sense of what is really, who's a really good candidate or not. I think this question the CEO Perplexity is posing, that he's challenging it's just, AI is going to replace all this. No, I think AI is making it absolutely useless. And that's a completely different kind of direction on where AI is taking this given function. I can tell Bonnie really wants to rip into me. So go ahead, Bonnie. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to rip into you, but I do want to rip into this Perplexity statement. I think we saw this where another firm, was it Clavio, I think, had cut 60% of their workers in favor of AI, and then ended up hiring them all back within like 6 months. So, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, so this is something that everyone should keep in mind, is that these big tech CEOs for big AI, who I kind of liken more to religious figures than corporate executives, they're pretty religious about their technology, and they have a vested interest in doing so for their various pressure that they're experiencing from their investors to actually show they can make money. So they like these kinds of things, but I do think the points are important, because I do think, unfortunately, in my view, that many executives take these folks seriously. And Thomas actually just said this in the chat. He says, "Whoever is short-sighted enough will believe him," and that means most CEOs and their boards. I would add that the article about this, I think, is rather fawning and uncritical as well. This particular one was from Gizmodo. But anyway, so this reminds me a lot, Bonnie, of the developer thing, when these breathless predictions developers are going away. It feels like a lot of times they're kind of singling out one aspect of a job and assuming that when that goes away, the job will go away, right? So I do think that AI is going to be able to automate some of the drudgery around the efforts that recruiters go to. But anyone who has spent time in HR, and I've been a recruiter and I've run a recruiting desk for a number of years, I ran a bunch of them, and the admin stuff was a pretty small part of why I was getting paid. You know,
Yeah.
so much of it was relationships. And last time I checked, AI wasn't very good at relationships because it had a way of catastrophically forgetting the interactions. I mean, what do you think? Isn't that sort of what we're dealing with here? Is like kind of looking at a narrow part of a job and saying that's the job?
Without a doubt, because there's so many other facets of the job that are more relational that a robot can't be trained to do. They are dealing with the politics internally of getting a role improved. And so I think there's, at this point, I don't know that any robot has been trained to navigate organizational structures and cut through that bureaucracy that's required as a recruiter to get your job done. I mean, it does strike on a chord that I think everybody sees as low-hanging fruit, improving the recruiting process. We saw just today announced that SAP has purchased smart recruiters. So there is 100%, I think, acceptance by everyone that the whole talent acquisition process is the low-hanging fruit and is, very due for an update. But I don't know that that necessarily is going to eliminate all the jobs in recruiting either.
Well, especially when you look at the kind of talent that companies are salivating over right now, that's all about getting people on the phone and talking them into why they should move from a really cool job to an even better one. I just don't see how, if you don't understand that about recruiting, shouldn't you just shut up and not talk about recruiters anymore? Anyway, sorry.
Well, I think that's a critical point that never seems to pop up in a lot of these articles, and that is whether it's the best recruiters not only have multiple conversations with the best candidates, they are, to your point, trying to develop some sort of connection with them, and if they know that someone's a really hot, valuable commodity, they'll do anything they can to keep them pumped, energized, and moving through the process. Well, one of the things they do, I think, a great job of is kind of blowing through some of the, I don't want to even call them workflow, but it's some of the bureaucratic kind of obstacles that pop up to kind of slow down the time to hire and cause people to start dissipating and disappearing from the pipeline. Great recruiters are doing a lot that doesn't necessarily get valued or incorporated into some of the more mechanized processes that are out there.
I also thought this. We got security alert. I thought this was really interesting too. Like, just to take a step back, this is the CEO being referred to in the article. What happens to the human worker when their job functions are condensed into a single prompt? Srinivas offers an optimistic view. Are you ready for the optimistic view?
Go.
This newfound efficiency will free up humanity's time and attention. Notice that they didn't mention work or gainful employment. He believes people will spend more time on leisure and personal enrichment that they will choose to spend it on entertainment more than intellectual work. In his vision, AI does the drudgery, and we get more time to chill and scroll through X or whatever social media they like. So his utopia is us doom scrolling all day long on social media. So that's one thing. Does that sound very utopian to anyone?
Especially online. That doesn't sound like an improvement in my life. Not at all.
Right. And so this is the kind of people that we're listening to. And then I want to point out from a media perspective that these articles come out, and listen to this. The AI agent, is described by one of its architects, as not merely a new feature. It's a catalyst for a profound and potentially brutal transformation of the white-collar workforce. The future of work is being written in code, and according to Srinivas, the first draft will be ready far sooner than most of us think. So this article ends with according to this person. So the journalist didn't even attempt to ask for anyone else's perspective, but this godlike figure that is dictating our collective view of technology. Folks, if we don't get a little more perspective on what we're consuming, we're screwed. Like that's not helpful context. That's basically a press release. So please don't take that stuff and run with it back to your company and think that recruiters are going away. It's all about drilling into these processes and figuring out how to make them work better. And in fact, the acquisition today, and I told Bonnie I didn't want to talk too much about vendor stuff on the show today, but I will say this. I'm going to write about it in my weekly, but so much of this is about connecting these processes end to end, not getting rid of them. It's about like figuring out the fact that we could do so much better if we didn't have all these disconnected silos working separately. And so this is a big part of, I think, why this acquisition is happening, not because recruiters are going bye-bye because Smart Recruiter built an AI tool.
Right.
Anyway, for those of you who don't know, Bonnie also has an AI show that happens most Fridays, right? Is that right?
That's right. Most Fridays. And it's called AI in the Real World. The main purpose is to showcase customers who have already employed AI within a function of their enterprise software. And Jon, I will tell you, it is proving very difficult to get guests because I will go to customers that are recommended and say, hey, can you tell us how you're using AI in your business? And they're like, I'd love to be on the show, but we're not. So I think it's difficult to find those customers who feel like they've fully embraced and are live with a particular function of AI. And so, it's easy for us to book vendors who want to come and talk about their product and all of the things that it potentially can do for customers, but it's a much different ask to get customers to come on and talk about how they're using it today. Because I think it's almost like a needle in a haystack to find them. It's not to say that we haven't found them, but I think we're shifting some of the conversations we're having with customers to be, what's your approach to selecting AI right now? How are you deciding whether to use it? And which tools to use in your organization, more so than, tell us how it's working.
So I don't want to give the Perplexity folks any more airtime than we've already given them, but I want to point out like some of what's being, discussed there is kind of out there outlier kind of stuff, in my opinion. And there's a lot of that goes on, to your point earlier, Jon, in this space. One of the ones is that got my hackles up this week were stories about Silicon Valley wanting to adopt an already outlawed practice in China where you work, it's called 996. You work 9-hour days, 6 days a week. And, that's, and some employers in Silicon Valley are actually telling headhunters and recruiters, don't even send anybody through the process unless they're willing to work 70 plus hours every week. So, I don't want to give any kind of credit for that, because at the same time in Europe, we have a number of countries that are moving to a 4-day work week of 8 hours a day. So we've got two different extremes where the Europeans will be working half as many hours roughly as what's going on in Silicon Valley. And I think the smart people have to be able to look at some of this stuff and go, it ain't all perfect, folks. We need to have more critical thinkers and people with more critical eye looking at these kind of trends. Shall we hit the next one, Jon?
And by the way, I do want to mention that, in the excerpt, Brian, that you pulled here, talks about finding engineers from Stanford who've worked at top AI companies, collect their LinkedIn profiles, grab contact details, send personalized emails. That all sounds totally fine, except he didn't mention anything about regulations, compliance, discrimination, lawsuits, and the idea that, oh, we're going to hire from here, that might not be legal to exclude other places. So I'm guessing that our Perplexity CEO has really not been briefed on the nuances of labor and labor law. So that's something else to take into account there, even though I don't think he's wrong about those processes that could be improved. Bonnie, by the way, I wanted to ask you, what did you think? Oh, wait, we got to get to this here. What did you think of Brian's slide that he put together of all those action shots?
Wow. And it's sad. None of those
like
are
that?
even those, none of those are AI generated. I do want to mention, I'm not sure exactly the lower right, who the gentleman is.
yeah. He's like, "What's up, Bonnie? How you doing?"
So that came up. All those pictures were on like Google or something. I just typed in your name, and all those images came up, including that guy's face. So I just threw it in there for a lark.
Is he like anyway. He's like a super fan, I think, Bonnie.
Maybe.
He's like a big into Raven Intel. Oh, and by the way, Bonnie, we should be congratulating you. I saw that you also expanded your team this week, so you got an exciting post on LinkedIn. Congratulations! I know you've done a lot of heavy lifting, so that's cool.
So glad. Thank you so much.
So can we expect exponential output now? This is so exciting.
Just wait. We've created a clone within the organization, so it's us and the bots, and gosh. Just you wait.
Brian, you want to get into some more AI or reality with Bonnie here?
Yeah. So here's one. I'm constantly astounded at the hallucinated material that comes up out of AI. I got a newsletter, an aviation newsletter this week. And on the left image over there with that the white American Airlines 747 flying above the clouds, I'm going, that can't be real. That's a 747-400. And American, if they had any of them in their fleet, they haven't had a 747 for decades. And some of the ones they had were the short, squatty 747 SP. Now, I knew that because I've got bazillions of miles on American. I know I've been in every kind of aircraft they've ever flown ever. And I asked the question on, what happened to all their 747s. You could read the article on the right. The fact is, they were done with them in 1994. That preceded their merger with US Air. And there's no way in the world they would have ever painted a 747 in a paint scheme that didn't exist until after that merger. So I knew this was a bogus image that was on that deal. And I decided to do some more checking because I thought that had to be an AI generated image. And the more I dug into it, I found out, no, you can license that image from Shutterstock. And I'm like, huh. I look on Shutterstock, and yeah, they're selling AI images, all right, but they have real strict rules about you had to use their tools to build it. And that was listed as a photograph, not an AI tool. So I dug into it some more, and I found out people took that image off of a flight simulator game that Microsoft sells. That's a total fake image. And yet it's getting passed off and passed around as if it actually existed. If there ever was a reason why we have to have like a person in the middle and somebody to double check the output of what's coming out of these AI tools, and I've caught consultants and other people who didn't have enough subject matter expertise to catch the hallucinated or faked out stuff. This is just a real problem. I don't know why we're talking about turning over a critical function like recruiting over to a bunch of AI tools when the AI stuff is going to do us wrong time and time again. So anyway, sorry I'm on my high horse on that one, but that one just jumped out at me in my email this week.
And Brian, I mean, images are just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's really video and some of the new tools there that are going to be the real issue with authenticity. And I actually just today on CNN, Sanjay Gupta, the medical health expert, he had a message that showed his this AI version of him endorsing some illegitimate cure for Alzheimer's. And so he had to like warn his audience that that wasn't him. And here are the things to spot, in like an authentic video. So I think, it's no longer, static images that are the problem. It's going to be the video that you can't tell a difference.
Indeed. And the authentication of expertise is going to be, I think, one of the big important points. And enterprises hopefully can bear down on some of that because they have some of the technology to do some of that. But it's going to be hard because the so-called exploitation of that is moving faster than the accountability teams. So that's just the world we live in right now. I think there is one really cool thing about that to me, which is my sort of reverse optimism around this, which is I think these things are really an endorsement of the importance of domain expertise. And if I could talk to young people right now, and I do occasionally, that's going to be one of the points I'm going to emphasize is don't give up on your ambition to really become great in your field, whatever that field might be, and learn all you can, because it's only the domain experts. Like, look at what Brian just found with that plane. I wouldn't notice that in a million years. You know what I mean? Like I would just be like, oh, that's American Airlines. You know what I mean? But Brian spotted that. And that's the kind of thing is that as these systems get better and better, what they're trying to say is that you don't need human domain experts anymore because these systems have PhD level knowledge in all of these areas. And that's true to a point, but that's kind of a limited sort of type of knowledge. It's not the true robust domain expertise that can spot critical issues if the machine cites a reference that doesn't exist or a study that doesn't exist. So I think for younger professionals, it's an endorsement that your domain expertise, along with a heavy dose of critical thinking, is going to be really, really important going forward. It's not rendered irrelevant at all.
So, for those who don't know, Bonnie's business is really around figuring out who the best service providers are for HR projects. That said, one of the biggest debates going on in the big consulting firms is what happens to their pyramid if they don't need all the junior staff to do a bunch of the research work, the scut work, and everything else. So you're losing your ability when you shrink that pyramid down dramatically to create a bunch of deep subject matter experts. You got a bunch of folks relying on a very flawed tool. I really wouldn't want someone to do maintenance on, say, a jet aircraft engine if the only thing they knew came from some AI generated content. God knows how screwed up that could be and how many lives could be lost because of that. I don't want a doctor that hasn't worked with a surgeon, hasn't worked with other surgeons. I want them to have had that kind of apprenticeship process because it's not that I'm not a trusting person. It's just that I don't trust a lot of the garbage that I keep seeing coming up again and again on AI products. Anyway.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to say that one of my areas of research for the next year or two is going to be exactly how the best companies are doing that, like bringing juniors along in the midst of all this change and disruption, because I think it will involve some kind of human mentorship capacity as part of that, but I'm not sure, honestly, how that works yet. I'm still trying to figure it out, but the smart companies are going to figure out how to turn juniors into seniors, and it's not just going to be about putting them in front of an LLM and letting them ask questions. There's going to be something else there too, and I don't know what that is yet, how it's going to work. Sorry, Bonnie, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I have interns working at Raven this summer. So I see firsthand how reliant they are on AI for learning. And it's an incredible tool to get very, very junior people who know nothing about the industry up to speed very quickly and, and proficient to sort of talk the talk, right? So I'll say that it's very helpful to get them their basic aptitude where it needs to be, more efficiently than we've ever had. On the other hand, what I have seen is that learning without friction is not, they're not learning without friction. And that's the danger of AI, is it'll feed them exactly, what it wants to have them know. But when they're not really internalizing that, or, having multiple points of view, they're not really critically thinking either. So we've started doing other things where I'm testing them one-on-one conversationally, so that, I know that they're not just another bot that we have. We can do that sort of thing all the time. But I think, the young people today, and, that are coming out of and graduating from school, unless they have had friction in the learning process, they're not going to be very useful at all.
Yeah. Brian, are we going to say something about that?
Nope.
Yeah,
I think Bonnie did a nice job. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. I'd love to talk more about that. We've had kind of a pretty thorough critique of some of the downsides of these systems, but Bonnie, I know in your role you're also looking for cool stuff, and so I just wanted to give us a chance to talk briefly about cool stuff after kind of piling on for a long time. I will say briefly, in my most recent article on AI for content formatting, I make a dual case. I talk about the importance of human creativity, but I also talk about how powerful AI can be for certain kinds of formatting. And I've had some real advances in certain areas, including creating summary videos with AI of shows like this into kind of smaller summaries, which is actually a hard challenge. It's not an easy challenge. And I can't do it. I can't stay up Friday night and do all of that. And so some of that is really cool now, but the difference is, in AI, what you find is there's a huge difference between, ooh, I did something cool and sandboxed it for my small business and put it out there. That's totally different than enterprise grade AI at scale, right? Which is kind of, I think, part of probably what you're running into in your show, is that there's such a difference between the Twitter and LinkedIn crowd saying, look what I built this weekend, versus this is something that enterprises can do it, securely, and meet all the compliance requirements and do it at scale and have it work. So with that in mind, like, are you seeing anything that's cool and inspiring that's kind of making you say, hey, there's something we should look at there?
Yeah. So I've seen cool demos of things that are possible with, like, ask my pay stub, and the ability for employees to query systems about their benefits, or help me compare certain things, or like we were talking about in the talent management space, right? The ability to screen, at scale, is easily possible there. I think all of that stuff, though, is my guess is we're solving a lot of like 25-cent problems right now. It's the low hanging fruit. And the way that we know that nothing has been truly used at scale that's, groundbreaking, is we haven't seen any lawsuits yet. Because I think, like, as soon as companies start truly providing agency to these tools, it's going to be radically amazing. But at the same time, there's going to be things that go wrong, and there's going to be lawsuits and huge fallout. I don't think we've seen it yet. And so I think, back to the point where I said, it's difficult for us to find a company that has truly rolled out groundbreaking, AI tools company wide. Like it, there's things that are being used in pockets, but they are more chatbot in nature than they are truly, changing an entire workflow process. So they're administrative solutions.
Just real quick, I think there is going to be some interesting middle ground, and I kind of describe those as use cases that companies should embrace, because that putting human supervision in the right places doesn't totally destroy ROI. Folks are fantasizing about autonomy because they love getting humans off the balance sheet, because it's so exciting to get humans off the balance sheet, because balance sheets always look better. But I did a use case at some scale with a travel agency, and I thought for sure this wouldn't be a good one, because bots dealing directly with consumers about travel stuff, so many things can go wrong. But they did it really smart. They focused on very particular use cases where the bot could answer their questions very effectively, and they managed to route the important stuff to the humans, and the support team did save a certain percentage of time. It wasn't like life-changing stuff, but it was the 20, 30, 40% kind of thing, and then deflecting a lot of call volume from that first level stuff. And what they did is they reinvested those support. They didn't fire them. They reinvested them into VIP related support roles. And so I think there is going to be a middle ground of companies that don't go crazy on autonomy, but accept the fact that there's modest value that can be achieved. And I think that will be really interesting. Now, those use cases aren't the kind that really excite Brian, because Brian's looking for, and I think rightly so, for more transformative value propositions. And I think that's what you're saying, Bonnie, is that those are the ones we're not finding yet.
Not yet. Not yet. I mean, I have a couple of examples of really cool things that we're doing with voice of customer. You know, so we synthesize all of the feedback on projects for our customers, and we train an AI based on lots of data and feedback collected from customers, and then we put that into a podcast that's 5 minutes long to summarize all of the themes, and we provide that back as learning to our customers. And the quality of that podcast, the interaction between the quote unquote AI hosts, is unbelievable. People, when we give them this podcast, they can't tell if it's AI or if we really have a Caleb and Abby on staff that is doing this podcast. And we're able to produce this content at scale for our clients. So it's that example I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've heard one of them, and I thought it was really good. And it struck me as one of the features of content is kind of going to be hyper personalized content, because, you know, obviously I wouldn't want to listen to 20 of those because they don't apply to me, but for the customer, like, listen to that. It's a pretty engaging format. Now, I personally could tell that they were bots, but keep in mind, this is my bailiwick. You know, I live for art and creative content. So I think I have a much more finely tuned thing for that than most people. But in terms of the sound quality and all of that, it absolutely sounds like a conversation, and and the way it's done between two people is very engaging as well. Like, it's much more interesting than if you just, for example, if you did it yourself and just read it. That's not that interesting for you to just read that and send a recording. And meanwhile, you would never have time to do it. So that's what I think is so interesting. Instead of replacing creative people, you're actually scaling your own creative and original content, which I think is a much more powerful vision. Anyway, Brian, do you have any last thoughts for Bonnie?
Unless she wants to comment. I think there's one more slide there, but I know we're...
Well, yeah, I'm going to bid
a
adieu to Bonnie in a second. We're going to wrap it on our own. Bonnie, do you have a final comment there on what I just said? I think I'm going to say something.
No, and I think at some point the AI is going to be so good, we're going to know it's AI, but that's okay with us, because it's like, hey, that content is just as good, and it's not, you know, doesn't sound clunky, and it's accurate.
Absolutely.
Listening to you two guys on this last topic makes me wonder whether some of the software CEO keynotes I've heard were actually bots talking at me instead. But anyway, let's keep going.
The teens that's an insult they use. They compare humans to bots when the humans are mediocre, and it's probably a fair assessment. Bonnie, thanks for joining us. If you want to hang out backstage, we'll be wrapping in a few. If you're busy, you can just head out, whatever you want to do. But if you want to hang out, feel free. Okay. Thanks for joining. That was great to have you.
Definitely.
All right. So, Brian, we're on the home stretch, man. Oops, wrong format. Let's go to the right format. You got a couple more for us here. Oh, this resume conundrum.
Yeah, to give you an idea, let's just jump down there where it says, how would AI perfect a fast food worker's resume? And this goes to the hyperbole or hyperbolic kind of comment I was talking about earlier. So, you've got someone who says they were, uh, uh, I can't read that red on my screen, but the bottom line is uh, they could take some basic statement, like they'll call it responsible for maximizing customer
Customer outcomes.
outcomes
Yeah.
with a focus on timely placement of customer orders. In other words, they carried a customer's food to their table. But that's what AI tools do when they rewrite resumes or whatever. They can take something that mundane and make it sound like it's the most important task that's ever been accomplished in the history of work over
I
the
like your
last several centuries.
I like your second one. Consistently met or exceeded guidelines for product quality, and
Yeah.
you made sure every hamburger had pickles on it.
Right. And that's what bugged me was when I got my resume back from this tool. It made everything so drecky that hell I wouldn't hire me. I mean, because I wouldn't believe a word that's in there. Bonnie used that word authenticity. That's exactly what it is. Nobody talks or writes like this. It's just a bunch of bullshit. It's non-value added. It's a waste of time, and it just clogs up recruiting people's calendars as well as the ATSs with stuff that is remarkably anyway. Let's keep going.
Hey, Brian, just real quick, there's a video I want to finish checking out, but it's a guy that played around with an AI bot by using that kind of jargon in his application, and
Yeah.
the bot would get so excited. Wow, you know how to maximize customer satisfaction, and it's just like hilarious. We'll have to take a look at that maybe for next month. And the humorous aside whiff of the month. These are our runners up. It was a lot of competition this month.
Oh, there were some doozies out there. The one on the left, that's the YouTube video that Gwyneth Paltrow did in the aftermath of the astronomer love cam kind of thing. I told John earlier in the week that I was actually thinking about making a fake, kiss cam, image and having like two software company CEOs with one having his hands around the other. But I'm allergic to lawsuits, so I didn't go there. What was the other one here?
The Google Street View, yeah. It's a
Oh yeah.
good way to make a living if you can, suing Google and getting awards. I'm not sure it was worth it though, because Google Street View captured him naked in his yard in Argentina.
Well, that motivated me to actually see what was on my Street View, but nothing there that I could monetize.
So the question
anyway.
becomes which whiff top these two in Brian's estimation, and what do we have here?
Your favorite story, probably it may be your favorite for the year, but anyway, go ahead and tell it. You love talking about this one.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, this was just vibe coding gone wrong, right? And we're going to see more of this kind of thing. And look, I mean, this incident that culminated in the loss of the production environment, like, it's a little sensationalized because they were able to restore the environment. And in fact, that's not really a problem that you have to have in that circumstance. You can set up guardrails that prevent that exact scenario from happening. But the point is that there's a limit to what you can accomplish with vibe coding, and it comes back to, I think, a major theme of our discussion today, which is that experts are still highly relevant to processes, and that's truly the case for development, obviously. And then the second piece of it is that security is just a major theme in AI. And I was watching a video last night. It was talking about you really need to just start from the ground and design with security first and foremost in mind, instead of just saying, oh, I'm having a lot of fun in this environment. And to Jason Lemkin's credit, who was the customer of Replets that did this, he was pretty blunt in an honest, candid way about what went wrong and why, and what the lessons are, including, don't trust agents to do certain things. But it was really interesting to watch the evolution of his diary of using it, because he talked about how it was so engaging and fun and it was so addictive. But then over time, he started calling it Reply because it kept on getting things wrong. And this is someone who's very enthusiastic about the technology. So I think this is a big theme right now, is that even enthusiasts are kind of realizing the limits of some of this. So anyway, that's why I like that whiff so much. And next month we'll probably cover the T story, because that's such a big story. It needs its own slide. And yes, indeed, bad vibes coding, no doubt. Very bad vibes. Something that inspires or creates value. And Brian, it's Lexi, the star of the show.
Yeah, I got her locked up outside the office so she can't come in and jump all over my lap and knock my laptop over and everything else. That dog is just hard on productivity, let me tell you. She's only 1 year old though, so uh, I have to be patient with her, just like I used to have to be really patient with like new college grads back in my Anderson days. Anyway, I was going to talk about the 996 rule at this point, but since we've already covered it, then I think we've got the creating value kind of point here. That's a tough way to create value, though, by making people work 9-hour days, 6 days a week. But anyway,
Give us something that inspires, Brian. I know you can do this.
Well, I will say this: the most inspirational thing to me this week involves how I whipped up a media frenzy on behalf of my wife, because she takes care of like 13 of these little free libraries all over the county. And some punk over the July the 4th weekend filled one of those boxes up with a bunch of explosives and blew one to smithereens. The cops came, everything else, and it happened to be in a city park that has a big water feature, and kids go run around playing in there, and it blew wood shards all over the place, burned in a bunch of books. Anyway, I used my marketing skills and I put together a couple of stories, got some photos and everything, before and after kind of things. Next thing you know, the story's going, it gets like 5,700 people on the Nextdoor app, of all things, pick it up and go with it. Now I got all kinds of like volunteer groups, Girl Scouts, everyone else. We'll build you a new box. We'll this, we'll that. The city gets involved. Their park district says, we'll put it back together. The city communications person is like, what can we do? And then next thing, Fox News local affiliate reaches out to me. Next thing you know, there's my wife and I standing at the park where there used to be a little library. We're being interviewed on television. Then it gets picked up, put on Facebook. Then it gets picked up by MSN. I forgot how much I learned in college on marketing, and how much I've learned on the job dealing with the press and everything else, is being, this side of it a lot nowadays. I'd hate to be the boys that, I'm guessing that it was some boys that blew it up with a bunch of M80s or a mortar. I got to believe by now, because the tens of thousands of people that have seen and heard of this story, they better not ever whisper a word of it to someone else. Someone's going to find out, and the police are looking for them now. So we're going to get a new box in just 2 weeks' time. And people have been bringing boxes and boxes of books over to donate to put them in there. So the community has been a pleasant surprise to me. And I was happy to see that. So you want to talk about inspires? I'm inspired by my fellow, men and women of this world. They're coming through. I wasn't inspired with the punks that blew the box up, but the after effect has been really good.
Yeah, for sure. And you came through with an inspiring anecdote, which I think we needed. And I think it kind of ties into one of my big themes, which is that we increasingly live in an algorithmic world. And so how do you contend with that? Because you can try to get attention, or you can create an alternative response. And I think a lot of the alternative responses right now are about community and about connecting with people who share the same interests. And that's still possible to do. And that's a great example of it. And that's one of the reasons why I like doing this show and like hearing from folks like Thomas. And thanks again, Bonnie, for popping on, and also Greg and another popular commenter. Thank you for doing that, because that's what makes this worthwhile, is this kind of interaction. And, we don't have to just take what's served of us. We can kind of create our own dialogue and our own conversation. So let's do that, and maybe we'll get better. So thanks a lot for joining us. We're going to keep doing this every month. So you can expect another one, and that'll probably be a fall preseason blowout, I would think, Brian. Well, we're going to need to kind of forecast what's coming, because we're going to be hopping on planes pretty soon, but we got a little more respite first. So.
Oh, and I was going to ask Bonnie if I'm going to see her at HR Tech. That's just like 6 weeks away, if that, maybe 5 weeks away.
Bonnie, if you're in the chat, I think you might be. Are you going to come? I'm guessing that's a yes. One would think.
Well, anyway, let's let the audience loose. They've heard enough from us today, and thanks everyone for being on the podcast.
Thanks all. We'll see you for a pre-event preview in the end of August sometime. Later.